Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe it.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Special thanks to the President of the United States of America. Great Vice President Mike Pence.
She likes Mike Pence better than Donald Trump. She ran the whole thing, the whole congressional race without mentioning the Trump. She didn't. Hey, everybody, we're number 2. Damn it. No, there's no prize for coming in second in a congressional race. But, hey, we're talking about a district that proudly elected Newt Gingrich, that proudly elected Johnny Isakson, that proudly elected Tom Price. That's why we had a special election, because Tom Price, after trading on, in the stock market, stocks that he was legislating, introducing legislation that would affect their prices. That's why they call him Price, I guess, Tom Price. He actually went woo to Health and Human Services, and he had an empty seat there left in Georgia 6th, which... if Ossoff had won, he'd have to wipe that seat down. I mean, you're talking Clorox bleach. You're talking, heavy wiping to get the stains, the stench. But anyway, we don't have to do that because we lost. We lost the election. And you know what's really crazy is in South Carolina, where they had to replace Mick Mulvaney, the Tea Party favorite, who's now at the Office of Management and Budget, or as we like to call it at the Geek Show, OMB. His seat was left open too, and so they had to have a special election there in South Carolina. And the Democratic Party, you may not have noticed the South Carolina because nobody threw down. Because that one seemed like completely unwinnable. It just is like it's South Carolina. I mean, no, not even. And so the Democrats didn't throw down there. I mean, there was no big money put in there. The South Carolinian didn't put big money in there. And, what's really crazy is the Democratic candidate did better there than John Ossoff did in Georgia with all the money. I can't, is the problem that they're Democrats? I don't, because, listen, we did lose. I just want everybody to know we did lose fair and square as far as I can tell, except for the gerrymandering. But, okay, that's it. Oh, gerrymandering. Yes, the Supreme Court's going to take up gerrymandering. Do you understand that? Do you understand the import of that particular thing there? That's going to be huge. Here's, the process of drawing a district is really big fun. If you're like a 12-year-old and you like to paint by numbers and stuff like that, you couldn't do worse than these lawyers and these, pollsters and these, professional campaign staffers. You couldn't, if they just threw, poop at the wall and that would be the shape of the district, it wouldn't be any better or worse than the way that districts come out now with science-y thinking about how to eliminate the Democratic vote from being a majority, even if it is. So, okay, the maps that get drawn, they get drawn after each and every census. We do a census every 10 years. So the maps that get drawn are based on the census, and then everybody goes to work figuring out, like, let's say you had a minority community, okay, and it was like a block long, okay? And so that block, you would think, would end up in the same district, right? Because this is a district that has a lot in common with each other, including their addresses, do you know? And that they would end up in the same district. But, oh, no, it's not to be. The Republicans who are drawing these maps decide, hey, you know what we can do? While these people are minorities in this country, they do make up this whole block, and this whole block is a district. So you know what we could do is draw a line down the middle of the block, and put half of them over there and half of them over here. And then the minority in this district is now a minority of 2 other districts. So they're the minority in the minority of other districts. And this is what happens with these maps. So the Supreme Court has made this major decision on Monday that they will take up a case out of Wisconsin. And the reason why this is important is because while the courts look at the maps to see if the maps have been racially drawn, thereby violating things like equal protection under the law, and then they remand those maps back to the legislatures that drew them, and they say, oh no, these are no good. They did it in North Carolina. They said racially, unfair. They've done it in several places where they've looked at these maps and they've said, you got to go back and redo this because what you did is an obvious, race thing. And but the Supreme Court has never, ever ruled on the constitutionality of gerrymandering itself. They have never weighed in. They have never issued a decision. And Monday morning, the justices announced that they would take up a case out of Wisconsin. And that Wisconsin case could result in a ruling, finally, that gives us one way or another. And, it's a slippery slope because you got the 5 now with the Gorsuch against the 4. But it could actually give us a decision from the Supreme Court on the constitutionality of partisan gerrymandering. Now, it doesn't mean that the Supreme Court will suddenly strike down the practice altogether, but it does mean that they could deliver a decision that basically has an unprecedented effect on the practice itself and how the practice is conducted and how it now has to, respect equal protection, the 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law. So we'll see, because all the studies that have recently been done and all the court cases that have been recently, heard, they say that these maps were drawn to prevent Democrats from controlling the U.S. House of Representatives, and that this has been going on potentially for 4 of the past 6 years. So you do have the Supreme Court that's going to look at these maps and figure out whether they've been illegally drawn to reduce the influence of not just racial minorities, but also of political affiliations, whether it's to dilute their effect, on what should readily be an identifiable district where they have, things in common, school districts, hospitals, doctors, groups of doctors, all kinds of things that would make a community a community. And the Supreme Court has never, ever found whether or not gerrymandering was constitutional or not. But if it should find that gerrymandering, after long last, is unconstitutional, it could have a revolutionary impact on the reapportionment that will happen after 2020. And of course, if that happens, it comes at the expense of the Republicans. And so they accepted this case from Wisconsin, because a divided appeals court in Wisconsin, federal judges, they ruled last year that Wisconsin state's Republican leadership in 2011 pushed through a plan so partisan that it did violate the Constitution's First Amendment and equal protection. So it violated free speech, and it violated equal protection. So the fact that the justices are even going to hear this case suggests that they will come up with a ruling on the actual constitutionality of gerrymandering in and of itself. Now, the jury is out about how many seats the Democrats could gain, but it could be a lot. It could be an absolute lot. It could be, enough to give us the majority. It could be everything. It really could. It could be like stunning. You could actually have maps that look like real neighborhoods, instead of like, here we have ones that look like vaginas, and you live like right in the middle of the labia minora, and you're not part of the labia majora. Do you know? I mean, really, seriously, we have maps that look like I don't know. They look like, genitalia more than they look like neighborhoods or you get like a little sliver that goes up the East Coast to, encompass all the wealthy voters that have the coastal property in cities that don't even share a name. Like Boca Raton East might be combined with Del Rey, but just East. Everything on the water is all in one district. And then the other neighborhoods are like split up into, the District 21, 22, 23, 24, because you might have, middle class people living here. And then next door to them might be, some middle class minority families, and they want to separate. So we'll see. But on the upside of this special election in Georgia last night, we did force them to spend a lot of money. A lot of, and the obscenity of the money. Okay, this is another Supreme Court ruling. This is why I say be careful what you wish for, because when David Bossie went all the way to the Supreme Court to ask if dark money, like people that don't have to identify that they gave to a movie that was a hit job on Hillary Clinton that said that she murdered Vince Foster and all the murders that she's committed, which somehow every prosecutor in every single prosecutorial office all across the United States, they just missed. They missed all the evidence that she murdered people. Just never happened, right? Never happened. Not even during the Bush administration, where he fired all the prosecutors and hired his own, handmaidens. So I don't know. But anyway, that movie, was the subject of Citizens United, which was a group that raised money to put those that movie out ahead of an election. Very close to an election, which used to have rules about how close to an election you could actually, do. It's like now you get these political action committees, like Karen Handel got that one where Steve Scalise's on a stretcher and you hear gunshots and all this. I mean, this is a ridiculous. And when you look at $50 million being spent, $50 million, 50. I mean, what could you buy for $50 million? I mean, you could buy your own island. It is an amazing. I mean, how much did Necker Island cost? I don't know. We'll have to ask Sir, from Virgin. How much did he pay for that? But I mean, $50 million to buy a congressional seat, one seat, one. That's obscenity. And and both sides did it. I mean, because it's allowed. And if it's allowed and somebody goes out and spends $25 million, you have to find $25 million to match their 25. What did we spend to pick a president this time? $4 billion? $4 billion? Now, I was talking to my newly hired, but dear, he's like a son to me. Okay, I hired. Oh, this is like crazy. I hired Jessica's first boyfriend. Okay, that's who I hired. Because he grew up in my house. I've known Scott since Scotty, they call him now. It's like they call Howard Howie. You know Howard's not a Howie. And Scott is not a Scotty. I don't know how this happens. It's like the gangster culture or something. They changed their names. But anyway, I hired him to be my producer. Finally, somebody to help me with the content of the show, like videos that won't keep playing or won't freeze. Do you know what I mean? I don't have to do them on the internet because he knows how to do this stuff. Anyway, I've known him. He's been in my house since he's 15 years old. And what did I tell you as you were growing up? Never go into radio. This is such a suck-ass business. There's no barrier to entry. It attracts the absolute worst people. The worst. The worst. People wander in. We're like circus freaks and we move from town to town. Don't do it. So what does he do? He gets into radio. And so he's produced people He's produced Rick Sanchez. He's produced Fernand Armandi, who you know from Joy Show. And if you're down here in Miami, Armand just got fired from my old radio station, WIOD, which was once the greatest radio station ever. But then you get a program director. Hi, Grace, who, sits in her office and hopes nobody, realizes she doesn't know what she's doing. And, has some drinks for lunch or something, I hear. So anyway, they fired Ferdinand, which was really depressing because he was the only liberal in that sea of mung down there, known as, Miami. And so it was my lucky day because Scott called me to see what he should do. And I said, well, why don't you come and talk to me? I called Jessica to ask her if it was okay. And she goes, oh, Aunt Randi, it was just a matter of time. So Anyway, his idea today, when we had our producer conversation, which I haven't had in a year with anybody because I haven't had a producer, he said, you know, these political action committees, they really ought to take all these millions and instead of throwing it into TV commercials or, you know, internet's efforts or whatever it is, let them take their political action committee money and set up, like for the coal miners, a training center where they can learn technology for the future paid for by John Ossoff or something like that. Go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.